Hi guys, welcome to Short Skirts and Sarcasm. I'm Caroline and this is my July wrap up. And I did feel a little bit slumpy, and so I didn't quite finish my TBR like I wanted to. But I'm going to tell you about all the things I did read and then share some stats with you at the end. So as always, these are in alphabetical order. And first, I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And this is a great classic Agatha Christie book. It doesn't feature the famous detectives like Poirot or Miss Marple. This is a standalone, it's not part of a series. 10 people get an invitation to go to this island for a party, so they're told. And they vaguely remember meeting the person that invited them, but they can't really remember what they look like. So they all show up the first night and have a chat, and they're like, oh, how do you know the owner of the island? How do you know? Blah, blah. And then a pre-recorded message gets piped in over a loudspeaker accusing them all of murder. 10 different murders to be precise. And then they all start dying one by one. And so it is immediately very clear that one of the party must be the orchestrator of all the murders, but it really keeps you guessing the entire time. I will say that I thought I had it figured out, and then something happened to made me second guess it, and then when you get to the end, you get the answer. And I would like to say that I was right the first time, but Christie is such a good writer that she made me doubt myself. So I was very impressed with this. And then I read Dinner Party, A Tragedy by Sarah Gilmartin. This was a NetGalley e-arc, and so I will include the full review that I wrote in the description box so you can read it for yourself. But this was about a woman who had 2 older brothers and a twin sister, but the twin sister unfortunately passed away, and so she and her brothers meet up for a dinner party to commemorate their lost sister's birthday, and of course the main character's birthday as well, since they are twins. And so it starts with this dinner party. The way the blurb made it sound was that like the entire evening took place, the entire book took place over the course of like this dinner party, and that's not the case. Basically, the first chapter is the dinner party in question, and then we go back in time to the childhood of all the siblings, and each chapter is like a few years ahead, and so you slowly find out what happens. And essentially it's a very dysfunctional family, so the death of the sister is only one of the several tragedies that befalls them, and it's a difficult read, but it's not too long. And it's very well written. The characters are all excellent. At the end, you feel very satisfied, or at least I felt very satisfied. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it for you how the sister died and what the other tragedies are and what else happens. But essentially, over the course of like this book, you essentially see the main character's life slowly fall apart. And it's not a happy book. So if you only want happy books, do not read this. But like I said, I found it to be very satisfying. Next, a happy book, 4 Things My Geeky Jocko Best Friend Must Do in Europe by Jane Harrington. This is one of my favorite books, and I know I've talked about it before, especially in my Books to Cheer You Up video. This will absolutely cheer you up. It's so funny. I've read it maybe 10 times, maybe more. And I read this with my mom when I was in California. That's our thing. We read this book together because it's just so delightful. It is about our main character, Brady, who's nerdy, geeky, shy, and also very athletic, as the title might suggest. And she is going on a trip with her mom. They're taking a cruise around the Mediterranean. And I think this book came out in 2006, so they are safely away from any COVID quarantine that might befall cruise ships today. They're safe. There's no illness. Don't worry. This is pure escapism if you want to take a vacation, but you can't right now because you can't travel. Read this book. And she has an extroverted best friend who writes instructions on her hand about the 4 things she must do while she is on this cruise. And basically it forces Brady out of her comfort zone, and it's hilarious. She makes friends on the boat. She embarrasses herself on the boat. She and her mother go sightseeing in their ports of call, and it goes disastrously, but everything's okay in the end. This is a very low stakes book. So there's no super duper drama. No one's in grave danger. So if you want something that is just light escapism, I would recommend this. Then I read Graceland by Kristen Cashore, and this is a part of Graceland Along, which is hosted by a Frolic 3 Fiction and some other people, probably. I'm not really sure. I've been wanting to read this series for a while. One of my friends was really into it. So when Graceland Along happens, I took it as my sign to read this series, or at least start it. And I thought the first book was okay. I really like the premise of it, which is some people in this fantasy world are born with gray eyes and a special skill, which is called a grace. And the main character, Katza, her grace is murder. And so her uncle, the king, essentially uses her as a torturer assassin, and she doesn't enjoy this life, so she decides to give it up. But then she runs into this other guy, also with the grace, whose name is Poe, which is hilarious to me because of the Teletubby named Poe, and also Poe is the German slang word for butt, and so the entire time I could only imagine the Teletubby in this whole book, which might have dampened my enjoyment slightly. I will say it's very well written. Anyway, Katza meets her Teletubby companion, and they then need to go on an expedition to find a missing person. And so there's a lot of action, there's a lot of character growth, there's a lot of things to like. It just didn't click with me, and so I will continue with the series. Maybe it will grow on me. I'm really hoping it will, because it's a very cool premise, very cool setup, and like I said, good writing. Then I read Joe Biden by Joe Osnoss, and this is a biography of Joe Biden, and it was fine. It was pretty short. It was about Joe Biden's life. There's not much more to be said about that. Then I read Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and I hated it. So if you watch my anti-TBR tag, I said I would never read Stephen King because the books looked bad, and pretty much the only people who are into Stephen King are annoying men. And so with regret, I read this book. It has a cat in it, which is how it ended up on my book club's radar, because this year we are reading books about cats. So yes, technically this does have a cat in it. It's an undead cat, but it's there. It was alive at some point. And honestly, the demon cat was the best character because everyone else sucked. The main character is awful. He has no growth, and he has this daughter who's basically a plot prop, that she only exists to be clairvoyant in a weird way. And then his wife is also a plot prop. She's just weird and hysterical the whole time. Again, no growth. Nobody grows through this except maybe the cat, and that is downward growth. So the writing was really bad. The plot was so boring. Like the plot is essentially there's magic dirt which brings dead things back to life. And that's it. And so the main character slowly goes crazy. You have better things to do with your time. Don't read this trash book. Then I read Red, White, and Royal Blue. This is a reread for me. I read it last year and really loved it then. And then in June, I read One Last Stop, which is Casey McQuiston's second book. And I loved that as well. I finished it and I essentially wanted more. So I thought I would go back to something I already loved by Casey McQuiston, Red, White, and Royal Blue, and it did not disappoint the second time. So this is a male-male romance between the first son of the President of the United States and Prince Henry of England. And they sort of start out as rivals. They can't seem to get along. And so as a really important PR thing, they are forced to spend time with each other and appear like they're best friends. But of course, then they do turn out to befriend each other, they like each other, and then they fall in love. And it's really cute and wholesome, and it's like very obviously fantasy, or rather not fantasy, but the product of someone's imagination. And so I think you do have to suspend your disbelief a bit, but it's worth it. It's pretty cute. And then Stiff Upper Lip Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. This is a book I've been meaning to get to for quite a while. I love P.G. Wodehouse's writing, and so this book has been on my shelf for years. So I did finally read it, and it did not disappoint. I am only sad that I didn't read it sooner. And this is about Bertie Wooster. He's part of a series. I don't think you need to read them in order. I certainly have not. I think this is number 8 or 13 possibly, and I've read like the first 2. Doesn't matter. Bertie has been strong-armed into going to the house of Sir Watkin Bassett, who he does not like and who does not like him. He had previously fined him £5 for, stealing a policeman's helmet? And so there is a lot of antagonism going on. But Sir Watkin's daughter, Madeline, is a friend of Bertie's who is engaged to his other friend, but their engagement is now in trouble. And in order to save himself from the prospect of being engaged to Madeline, he needs to go fix their relationship before it falls apart. But of course, while he is there, other dramatic, silly adventures ensue, and he gets himself into quite a scrape, and it's up to Jeeves to disentangle him. And so this was delightful. It's so funny. I would recommend any P.G. Wodehouse, but also specifically I would recommend this one. Then I read Triflers Need Not Apply by Camilla Bruce. This was a NetGalley e-arc about the very real person Belle Gunness, but this is a fictionalized look at her life, or at least what could have been based on what we know about her. So she starts out in rural Norway. She doesn't have a lot of prospects in life, and then her older sister Nellie invites her to move to Chicago with her because she's already there with her husband. So while she's in Norway, she commits her first murder. Belle Gunness is a serial killer. Did I say that? I don't think I did. Yeah, Belle Gunness is a serial killer. And so in Norway, she commits her first murder. No one suspects her, and so she moves to Chicago. And so this is a really sad book. I am not entirely sure what I was expecting when I read this, but I wasn't expecting it to be so sad. And it's very clear that Belle sees her murders as like the only way she can escape her current situation. And of course it's not. There are other things to do. And of course, as she continues, her murders get less and less understandable. And essentially by the end, she's just killing cuz. And so it's told from her perspective and how she's feeling increasingly trapped, and therefore feeling increasingly like she needs to lash out and murder more people, essentially. And it's also told from her sister's perspective and how she kind of comes to this dawning horror realization that her sister is killing people. I mean, I would recommend it. I think it was very well written. I thought the characterization was really good, but just know that it's semi-gruesome. It never feels salacious, but of course it's gruesome and just really sad. Not sad at all. I read True Loaf by L. Austin Johnson, and this was a short story. It was only 10 pages. And I got this as an e-arc from Book Sirens. And so this is based on a Balkan folklore story about bread ingredients. And because it's a short story, I'm not going to say much else about it, apart from that it's short and cute and delightful. And then the last book on this list is Where the Light Enters by Jill Biden. For a memoir by like a person in politics, sort of, I really enjoyed this because I find political memoirs to be very boring. Because of course everyone in it is usually still in politics, so they want to present themselves as like their best version of themselves, so they're still electable. And so a lot of cases that just seems to be like very dull and boring, and they're all the same. But this was much different than I expected. It was beautifully written, which is not really surprising considering that Jill Biden is an English professor with a PhD in English, so yes, she's a good writer. She talks about her life, her marriage, her or rather her marriages, because she was married before she married Joe Biden, and her relationship with Joe Biden's biological children, and essentially how she and Joe and the 3 kids that they eventually raised together overcame a lot of personal tragedies and hardship. And so it's not really about politics. And so I read this first and then I read the Joe Biden biography, and I think that's why I didn't really enjoy the biography as much as maybe I would have if I hadn't read this first, because that went through a lot of the same sort of like biological plot points, but it didn't have like that personal connection to it. So if you don't know, Joe Biden was married to a woman with whom he had 3 children, 2 boys, Bo and Hunter, and then a baby girl named Naomi, I think. But his wife and their daughter tragically died in a car accident. And so, of course, that's like super tragic to lose 2 people in your family at the same time. Also while being like in the spotlight, or at least semi in the spotlight. So Jill talks about how like she married into this family that was like a complete unit, but was still grieving a missing part. And she also talks about like how she had to essentially become like the stepmother to these 2 boys, and she knew that she wasn't their quote unquote real mother, but their relationship turned into a real mother-son relationship. It was very, very empathetic and like very respectful of everyone involved, whether they were still alive or had passed, and it was just beautifully written. It was also really sad for obvious reasons, but I think it had an overall hopeful tone. So if you don't mind reading about really sad things, then I would recommend reading this book. So we are finally at the fun part of reading out stats. So I read 11 books, a total of 3,231 pages, and an average rating of 4 stars. And that's everything I read in July. I am hoping that my August reading picks up a little bit, because I didn't get to everything that was on my TBR. I didn't get to Harvey Milk, His Lives and Death, which I was really looking forward to. I also haven't finished Conflict is Not Abuse by Sarah Schulman, which I wanted to read first because Jess Owens is having a live show about this book very soon for her book club. So I need to get to it, but it is a slow plod. So please remember to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on social media. All the links will be in the description box. And I will see you next time. Bye.